for the victims of the terrorist attacks in Texas and in Buffalo. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America,
Okay.
to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Justice for all.
Thank you. That's not germane with the families of those victims. Okay, given the fact that we have a lot of people participating virtually today, I'm going to do a roll call. Jen Liptak. Jen, you on?
Hi.
Okay. Senator Brewster, are you on?
Here.
Oh,
Yes, I am.
Anna Gork's here. I know Representative Davis and Gerald DeLon are not able to make it. Representative Zgorski, Ms. Gorski,
present.
John Tagg,
Here.
Stephanie Tarman,
Here.
Jessica Walls Laval,
Here.
Michelle Zmianik. You're here. I got confused when Jen walked in, sorry.
Can you note that I'm here for the work?
Yeah, and note that Jen Liptak is here in person. Thank you, Jen. Okay, with that, we'll go to the approval of the minutes of the April 29th regular meeting. We all had the chance to review the minutes. May I have a motion for their approval?
So moved.
Any questions or comment? A second, I'm sorry, I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that carries. Then we'll get the report of our chief executive, Kevin Kellerman. By the way, I'll take a moment to congratulate Catherine. We had the opportunity, me and some of our other board members, to see her win a Woman of Influence Award by the Pittsburgh Business Times. We're very proud of her. What was the music you danced to? What was your song? I couldn't hear what your song was.
My walk-up song was Body Beautiful by Salt and Peppa.
Got it. Everybody, all the honorees had to pick their own walk-up music, and we were all trying to guess what it was.
It was an interesting process to narrow down the songs.
So we're very proud of you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the acknowledgement, but it's more a testament to the role that transportation plays in the region, that the Business Journal would care who is at the front of the org chart at a regional transportation agency. It's just another reflection of how important the work is that this agency does in our region. So good morning, Mr. Board Chair, members of the public. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the employees we've lost since our last meeting. Operators Thomas Sedlak and John Mikhailovich, machinist William Kelly, and HVAC technician Shane Strader. Mr. Strader, as many of you know, was a victim of gun violence earlier this month. He was taken from us far too early. My personal deepest condolences and our collective condolences go out to his family. There are too many victims of gun violence. As the board chair noted, we have recently had 10 neighbors shot in Buffalo. 19 children, my son's ages, and 2 teachers shot in Uvalde, Texas. And between the 2 more shootings, there is obviously too much violence. We need to take action. I'm open to any suggestions on how Port Authority can support making this not be an issue that we deal with in our communities. And now for the family members we have lost and for all these victims, please a moment of silence. Thank you. Wow, a year ago, I stood at this podium and said 2020 had been a really tough year and it was the hardest we were going to see. And so first, my vow is I'll never say that again because it just keeps getting more interesting. There was a lot of uncertainties. We pulled together our first budget since the start of the pandemic. A lot of unanswered questions on ridership and funding. I don't know that I can stand here today and say that we know with certainty ridership is this or funding is that, but I do know that the work we do is too important for us not to be aggressive in moving forward and continuing to deliver for our communities. I'm more confident than ever that we have better information that we can move forward, and we know that transit remains a way that our communities are connected and is too important not to be invested. We have broken the 50% ceiling on ridership for many of our routes. Our growth is steady but improving. And as we've moved service around, as ridership has moved, we have moved service around as well. We shared with our planning and finance committees earlier this week maps showing how our service had moved. We still have over 600 buses on the road during rush hour. They're not where they used to be, but they're where we need them to be for our communities. Some of our largest employers have started to call their employees back. Some have not. There's a lot of opportunity for growth and change ahead, and we need to remain flexible. Hiring is a challenge here, and hiring is a challenge everywhere in the country. In many ways, the great jobs and benefits offered here at Port Authority have kept us ahead of the curve of seeing the lack of hiring that we've seen in other parts of the country. A March survey from the American Public Transportation Association showed that over 2/3 of agencies reported difficulty in hiring and retaining employees. At Port Authority, many factors have impacted this. We had a wave of retirements before COVID even came to hit us. And being honest, having a requirement that everyone who is driving for us, everyone working for us being vaccinated, has definitely made this more of a challenge. Pre-mandate, we were missing service, very much like in November of 2020. It is time for us to true up the schedules. So when a schedule is posted on the website or is printed, a passenger knows that that trip is going to be filled. So right now, that looks like about 4% of service we're not making. It was 1 to 2% of service in January and February. So what we're printing in June are schedules we know we can make. They will have 4% fewer trips. The budget does not have less hours of service included. The budget has the same number of operational personnel and more maintenance personnel. The goal for us is to stabilize these schedules in June, build up what we call our extra board, and as we did post November 2020, drop more service back in the schedule as we get more folks hired in. All of our long-range plans, our budget, are built on growing service in Allegheny County, and I'm confident we will get back into this right direction. Now, it's clearly our job to recruit, hire, and train operators and employees into the system. We continue to promote employees' opportunities at every turn. We'll be out at more job fairs. We're out at our elected officials' offices. We are working diligently to make sure that we get this recruitment up, and so we have more classes coming through. Again, a reminder, in COVID, for the beginning of the pandemic, we ran no operator classes because we didn't know how safe it was to have people very close. And as the pandemic loosened, we had smaller classes because we were observing social distancing. So we are playing catch up, but we are committed to getting more folks on the payroll and more service out the door. I want to say broadly, the employees at Port Authority, not just drivers, maintenance, and frontline supervisors, but lawyers, number crunchers, folks who do the planning, folks who do customer service, have been busting their backs for the last 2 years and before to keep buses and trains running as best as possible through what I really hope turns out to be the biggest challenge of our generation. I don't know if we can handle another one. But the staff has been amazing and have been completely focused on this. So if there are any issues in service not being run, it is absolutely not the folks who are out there providing that service today. The people who work here want to deliver the best service we can. We struggle when service isn't up to our high standards, and our commitment to our employees and our passengers on the street is we will do better. I'm proud of the dedication and the commitment I see at every single one of our garages throughout the pandemic and before. This is an amazing resource we have, and I look forward to expanding it. Today, our board will continue consider the 2023 budget. I'd like to thank the Biden administration, Secretary Buttigieg, and our local officials who over the last years have stood up for our riders and employees by approving 3 rounds of unprecedented funding to help support us through COVID and reimburse us on missed revenues and to cover things like extra overtime for sanitation, barriers for operators, air filtration designs. Our operating budget is a 5% increase over last year, and our capital budget is 6% higher. In addition to providing our valuable service to riders, some upcoming initiatives include a new hiring campaign, a rebrand on our agency. Anyone who's heard me talk has heard me talk about the 13 colors of buses on the corner and how easy that is to confuse somebody coming in new. Bus stops that say bus stop and nothing else. And park and rides that have 4 different types of signage. It's too confusing for folks to figure out how to use us. We deserve to do better. We're also looking at refocusing efforts on efficiency, equity, and effectiveness, rolling out a strategic plan that shows where we're making investments to continue the goals of our $4 billion Next Transit long-range plan. We'll start to see some of these projects begin to take shape, including the East Central River-to-River connection a transit financing study, and expanded studies to look at how we can better operate downtown, where to build a downtown hub, where to take an East Busway extension, and how to better invest on our busways for better service for the folks who take us 30, 40, 50 times a week. On the capital side, we're ordering 107 new articulated buses. We're beginning the downtown phase of the BRT system and other investments in service reliability and safety. Our vision of the future is becoming clearer, and we're taking the steps to get there. And unless there's any comments or questions, that concludes my report.
Take care. Any questions, comments? Okay, thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move on to the committee reports. The first, the report of the Performance and Oversight Committee from our Chair, Michelle Zemanek.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. The Performance Oversight Committee met last week, and I have 3 resolutions for your consideration this morning. The committee first reviewed 5 procurement items and determined the bids to be in accordance with the authority's procurement policies and procedures. The price is fair and reasonable, the bidders to be responsible, and the bids responsive. The Performance Oversight Committee recommends the award of the bids listed in the resolution for the total amount of approximately $2.4 million. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board approve this resolution.
May I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries.
The next resolution seeks authorization to extend agreements with a pool of firms for executive search, outplacement, and coaching services. In May 2018, the authority entered into agreements with Krauthammer and Associates Incorporated, the Bradley Partnerships Incorporated, and Kelfin Associates to provide these services for an initial term of 3 years and for a total not to exceed amount of $272,671 to be allocated on an as-needed basis. The agreements also contain 2 additional option years to be exercised by the authority in its sole discretion. In April 2021, the board authorized the authority to exercise the first option year through June 27, 2022, and increase the total not to exceed amount to $441,671. The Performance Oversight Committee recommends exercising the second option year with the firms through June 27, 2023, with no increase in the total not to exceed amount. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board approve this resolution.
I have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
The final resolution seeks authorization for settlement of a public liability claim. It was reported at the meeting that an accident occurred on January 14th, 2017 in the Shadyside area of the city. The authority's bus was in stop-and-go traffic when it struck the rear end of a pickup truck owned and operated by John Mastriano. The impact caused Mr. Mastriano's truck to collide with the rear of another private vehicle. Mr. Mastriano submitted a personal injury claim and filed a lawsuit against the authority seeking monetary recovery for alleged injuries he sustained as a result of the accident. The Performance Oversight Committee recommends authorizing a settlement payment to Mr. Mastriano in the total not to exceed amount of $152,500 with no admission of guilt or liability by the authority. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board to approve this resolution.
I have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion carries.
Very good. That concludes my business this morning, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Michelle. With that, we'll move on to the report of Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee from Mr. Tagg, our chair.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, and stakeholders. The Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee met last week. I have a few updates for the board. First, David Huffaker provided an explanation of the current service issues. Transit agencies across the U.S. are experiencing staffing issues, and the pandemic has complicated the ability of all transit systems to hire. Port Authority has been aggressive with hiring campaigns in an effort to adjust schedules to improve the reliability of service for the riders. The authority's June service changes reflect an effort to improve reliability by reducing scheduling service by, as Catherine mentioned, 4%. Next item was Philip St. Pierre and Ellie Newman provided an overview of the next quarterly service changes scheduled for June 26th. Philip explained that our goal for the next quarter is to improve reliability. One of the ways that we will do that is by reducing scheduled by service by 4%. By reducing service, we're able to increase extra board assignments, which give the agency extra staff to cover work for vacations and call-offs. The staff will continue to evaluate ridership and service levels to ensure that service is not only reliable, but equitable. The third item is the Committee for Accessible Transportation, CAT, met on May 5th. The Port Authority provided the committee with an overview of the Title VI triennial report and the next phase of the Mon Incline Rehab Project. Karen Hesh from Access provided an update on ridership, new staff, and drivers. She also discussed and updated the mask policy. Their next quarterly meeting is scheduled for August 4th. And lastly, the Allegheny County Transit Council met on the 25th. Port Authority provided the council with an overview of the June service changes. They also received an update on the budget and financial overview. The next scheduled meeting of ACTC is on June 22nd. Unless there are any questions, that concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Mr. Shegg? Okay, thank you, John. With that, we'll move on to the report of the Finance Committee from its Chair, Ann O'Rourke.
Morning, Chair and fellow board members. The Finance Committee met on Thursday, May 19th. Chief Executive Officer Catherine Kellerman and Controller Peter Shank reported on the preliminary FY 2023 operating and capital budgets. Ms. Kellerman reported on the broad impacts the pandemic has had on the industry generally and on Port Authority specifically. She reported that transit organizations nationally, including the authority, have been impacted by lower ridership and passenger revenue levels. In response, the authority has reoriented its service from commuter routes with lower ridership levels to local routes where riders have returned to transit more quickly. Ms. Kellerman also reported on recent rider surveys that indicate former passengers of the authority have changed to a hybrid or remote work environment, reducing their transit usage. Ms. Kellerman also reported on the industry-wide difficulty in attracting new employees to fill job vacancies and the renewed focus the authority is making on hiring additional talent. Ms. Kellerman also explained how the strategic plan will serve as the backbone of the operating and capital budgets. The budgets will also incorporate elements of Next Transit, as well as initiatives such as a rebranding project and the BRT capital project. Mr. Shank reported on the assumptions incorporated into the preliminary FY 2023 operating budget, such as a 15% increase in passenger revenues, historical wage increases for expiring labor contracts with ATU Local 85 and IBEW, and yet to be finalized medical premium increases for active employees and retirees under the age of 65. Mr. Shank also reported on the increase in state operating assistance included in the FY 2023 budget, as well as the volatility in the energy markets, which will cause diesel expense to increase over $20 million in FY 2023. Mr. Shank reported that the preliminary FY 2023 capital budget consists primarily of debt service, a purchase of 107 buses, and funding of the Bus Rapid Transit project. Also at the meeting, Mr. Shank reported on the April financial results. He reported that total operating income for the month of April was $3.7 million and under budget by $4.75 million. Total operating income is $636,000 less than March, primarily due to the credits related to the 2-week free ride period in March. Total operating income for FY 2022 is $39 million under budget for the fiscal year due to lower passenger revenue and access shared ride revenue. Federal ARPA funding will be utilized to make up for this revenue shortfall. Total operating expenses in April was $3.24 million below budget. Salary and wages was the only expense category over budget due to higher overtime levels for the month. Total operating expense for the fiscal year to date continues to trend below budget by $38.5 million. Total subsidy for the month was $2.2 million below budget. The authority did invoice $6.5 million against the ARPA stimulus program. Total subsidy for 2022 is $15.6 million below budget due to lower state operating assistance and vehicle overhaul subsidy and ARPA invoicing. Finally, it was reported that the authority ended the month of March with approximately $168.2 million in cash reserves. Unless there are any other questions or comments, that concludes my report.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, thank you, Ann. With that, we'll move on to the report of the Technology Committee from Jim Litak, as chair.
Thank you, Chairman Letwin. So the committee met on Thursday, the 19th of May, and there's two resolutions to consider. The first is authorizing to amend and extend the existing agreement with Scheidt & Bachman USA for farebox warranty services. The extension amount for the next year would be $959,400. The resolution would authorize the authority to amend and extend the agreement with Scheidt & Bachman to a total not to exceed of $3,622,500. The Technology Committee recommended entering into this agreement with Scheidt & Bachman, so my fellow members, I respectfully request that we approve this resolution.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll take that as a second then. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you. The second resolution is also with Scheidt & Bachman. It's to amend and extend its existing agreement for non-farebox equipment and maintenance software. So the extension would amount for the next year would be $1,978,034. And it would, this amendment or this resolution would authorize the authority to amend and extend the agreement with Scheidt & Bachman to a not to exceed total of $12,378,003. The Technology Committee recommended this agreement with Scheidt & Bachman. So my fellow members, I recommend approving this resolution.
May I have a motion? Second, I heard? Yep, okay. Any
Second.
discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, that motion carries.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to some new business. I just want to point out that we're very lucky to have the CEO that we have, who's gotten us through some very difficult times and has a number of accomplishments, among other things, advancing the BRT project, which is expected to break ground later this year or early next year. The authorities adopted Next Transit Plan, which is the first long-range transit plan in recent memory that we've had. Remove barriers to employment by implementing the Ban the Box. Implemented a mobile ticketing app and digital signage at stations and on vehicles to get more information to riders. Approved upgrades for 16 bus and rail stations. Implemented a new customer friendly fare policy. Broke ground on the Negley Station redesign and is successfully rebranding the organization to better reflect the improvements and advancements that she's led at this organization. And finally, not finally, but among my list, finally, successfully ushered the agency through two catastrophes, including the derailment of this North-Southern freight train in August of 2018 and the flooding of the Blue Line a couple months later. We knew she was the right person to hire when we hired her. We can't afford to lose her, and her contract expires at the end of this year. And I know from doing some research and speaking with others that there is a great demand for leadership in transit agencies around the country, and we need to keep Catherine. So I'm going to read our resolution. Whereas Catherine Kellerman was hired to serve as the Chief Executive Officer of the Port Authority of Allegheny County in November 2017. And whereas the term of her current employment contract expires on December 31st, 2022. And whereas her performance as Chief Executive Officer has met or exceeded expectations, and the board wishes to ensure that Ms. Kellerman's compensation reflects her performance and is commensurate with the compensation of the chief executives of other regional transit authorities. Whereas the board has determined it is in the best interest of the authority based on such performance and other factors to amend and restate the terms of her employment agreement and extend her term as the chief executive officer for the authority, retroactive and effective as of January 1st, 2022, to continue until December 31st, 2025. And whereas she's willing to accept the amended and restated terms of her employment agreement as the CEO of the authority, it's now resolved that subject to an execution of an amended and restated employment agreement as approved and informed satisfactory to the board solicitor, Ms. Kellerman shall continue to serve as the Chief Executive Officer of the Port Authority of Allegheny County at an annual salary of $269,500 plus other benefits, and upon such other terms and conditions as may be contained with the amended and restated employment agreement, retroactive to January 1st, 2022, and to continue until December 31st, 2025. Now for be it resolved that the chair of the board be and is hereby authorized to execute such amended and restated employment agreement on behalf of the Port Authority and take all such other actions and necessary and proper to carry out the purpose and intent of this resolution. So may I have a motion for approval of that resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. Congratulations, Catherine. We're thrilled that you're going to stay with us. You will stay with us, right? We went through all these, you will stay. Okay, thanks. Okay, that finishes the business of the board, and we'll move on to public comment. Our first speaker is Ross Nicotero, president of the ATU Local 85. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. I'd like to say thank you to the members of the Port Authority Board affording me the opportunity to, on behalf of the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 85. My name is Ross Nicotero. I'm the president business agent of ATU Local 85. As many of you know, I recently addressed the board 2 months ago to share the workers' perspective on the profound impact of Port Authority's vaccine mandate had on our members at Local 85, as well to the public and the people of Allegheny County. Unfortunately, since that time, not only did it fall on deaf ears, but things have gotten much worse, and you need to know about it and hear about it. So I'm going to repeat a few things that I said because a lot of you were at home 2 months ago when I was last here. As you know, over the past 2 years, we've reported to work every day, day in and day out, during the most challenging times in history, while management stayed home, even reaping huge bonuses while doing so, or new contracts. We carried public transit during the worst of times while politicians gratuitously called us essential workers and heroes. That's just laughable. They were all political sound bites designed to make themselves feel and look good. A few highlighted examples of concerns have grown worse since the last time I spoke here. 80 bargaining units of my members have been terminated so far, exacerbating the summary of elimination of 80 solid middle-class Allegheny County jobs. The authority's failure to fill the 100 positions that needed to be filled before the mass terminations have occurred. Remarkably, while the rank and file staff shrunk dramatically because of the mass firings and failure to report the open positions, the management ranks continue to swell. It makes no sense. The more management is needed for fewer employees. In fact, all the workers work from home on some stupid hybrid schedule. The decision to increase management positions under these circumstances is not only economically reckless, but it stands very distasteful to the rest of us. Who is the chief strategy officer? What does this person do? And what is the strategy? Destroying the service of Allegheny County? He might be the only one that's accomplished his goal. Despite the increased manager staff, the picks on how operators continue through operates have been so badly bungled, it's laughable. The bungle pick process has begun again. Service cuts in June as we speak. I have no idea who oversees this department. As being in charge of this local for the last 11 months, he has yet to return an email. The entire process has become a downward spiral with no accountability over here, and it's absolutely disgusting. This needs addressed, just as you need to stop addressing my members for petty issues daily. I had a hearing yesterday that a gentleman was off on COVID. He ain't allowed here if he's tested, but they want him back and discipline him because they think that he's been tested too much. It's unheard of. With that being said, we've recently been notified that you plan on changing the direction and the name of the enterprise. No surprise here, zero input from Local 85. As I stated the last time, the Port Authority cannot do this alone. As the leader of this local, representing the rank and file employees that make this system go daily, these examples do not bode well for the mission, particularly when our CBA expires 35 days from today. As you may recall, we are now in the beginning of negotiations for a new labor agreement. If this recent treatment of our members continues to grow, Once again, I'm afraid that we are in for a long haul and a very unpleasant process. These problems created you can resolve if you partner with us instead of excluding us and punishing my members daily. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Okay, David Glickman is our next speaker. Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'll be brief, and I hesitated to even come today because I'm well aware of what's happening with hiring issues, ridership being down, but I just want to make the board aware of an issue that a lot of people in the city have noticed lately, and I think it's just a symptom of COVID and all the issues that the Port Authority is dealing with. I'm here today as a large property owner in the city of Pittsburgh and as a neighborhood advocate just to make a maintenance request. A lot of the Port Authority properties are not being maintained the way they used to. And again, maybe this request just goes on the back burner because of bigger issues the Port Authority is dealing with. But I just want to make the humble request to the board. Properties in Shadyside and East Liberty. There's a property in East Liberty where you have a large bus station, large amounts of trash, debris, junk just sitting there on the main road for months on end. I mean, it's bad. It's significant blight, and we've made a lot of your team members aware of this, and I just want to stress that they have been wonderful. I'd be happy to provide the board a list of the people we've dealt with, but they've been responsive. They've responded cordially, but they all say the same thing. They just don't have the resources to maintain these properties properly. And I'm not talking about minor stuff here. And I live in Point Breeze, in less than a quarter mile from my house. Every day I drive by just huge amounts of junk on some of these properties. And, you know, your folks are telling us, well, we can get to it a couple times a year. And that to me is just bonkers. But again, I realize that maybe staffing and budgetary issues are affecting this. And I realize that in the grand scheme of things, this might not be a top priority for the Port Authority, but these are high-profile properties, and it's not just one. So if the board would just make a note of this, if nothing else, we would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much.
Our last speaker today is Andrew Hussein, who is not in the room. Are you on virtually, Andrew? Okay, then our next regular meeting is scheduled for June 24th, 2022. I want everybody to have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, and we'll see you next month. That we stand adjourned.